The cafe that remembered everyone. On a quiet corner of an old riverside district, between a tailor shop that had not changed its window display in 20 years and a florist who arranged flowers before sunrise each morning, stood a small cafe called Morning Tide. It was not famous, not trendy, and rarely appeared on city guides, yet it had a steady flow of customers who treated it less like a business and more like a familiar refuge. The sign above the door was slightly faded, the wooden frames around the windows worn smooth by weather, and inside there were only 8 tables arranged neatly beneath soft yellow lights. The cafe had been run by the same owner, Mr. Rahman, for nearly 3 decades. He was a quiet man in his late 60s, with calm eyes and the habit of remembering things people themselves sometimes forgot. Lila first entered Morning Tide on a gray afternoon when rain blurred the edges of the city and deadlines blurred the edges of her thoughts. She worked as a financial analyst in a glass tower across the river, a job that paid well but left her feeling disconnected from the world outside spreadsheets and quarterly reports. That day, she had just received news that she was being considered for a promotion that would double her workload and reduce her time for anything else. Lila pushed open the cafe door mainly to escape the rain, but as soon as she stepped inside, she felt something shift subtly in the atmosphere. The air carried the scent of freshly brewed coffee and warm bread, but beneath it was something else, comfort perhaps, or familiarity. Mr. Rahman looked up from behind the counter and greeted her not as a stranger, but as though she had been there before. He asked whether she would prefer her usual order or something different today. Lila hesitated, confused, certain she had never visited this place. She told him it was her first time. Mr. Rahman simply smiled and said that sometimes people forget their first visits. He prepared a cup of cinnamon tea and placed it before her without waiting for further instruction. It was exactly what she would have chosen if she had been asked to decide carefully. As she sat by the window watching raindrops trace lines across the glass, Lila noticed that the other customers were unusually relaxed. A middle-aged man read a worn paperback with quiet concentration. A young woman sketched in a notebook. An elderly couple shared a slice of cake without speaking, their movements synchronized from years of familiarity. The cafe felt separate from the urgency of the city outside. When Lila finished her tea, she reached for her wallet, but Mr. Rahman gently waved away her attempt to pay. He told her the first visit is always on the house. Before she could protest, he added that she would return soon enough. The statement sounded less like a prediction and more like a certainty. Over the following week, Lila found herself thinking about the cafe more often than she expected. She returned after work one evening, telling herself it was simply because she liked the tea. This time, Mr. Rahman greeted her by name. She froze briefly, unsure how he could possibly know it. She had not introduced herself before. When she asked, he pointed casually to the signature she had written on the receipt from her previous visit. Lila did not remember signing anything, but she dismissed the thought as distraction. She ordered a pastry, and again it arrived exactly as she would have preferred, slightly warmed with a light dusting of powdered sugar. As she ate, she noticed a small framed photograph on the wall near her table. It showed the cafe decades earlier, but among the blurred faces of customers, she thought she saw someone who resembled her younger self. She blinked, and the resemblance faded into ordinary coincidence. The more Lila visited Morning Tide, the more she sensed that the cafe held quiet knowledge about its patrons. Mr. Rahman remembered not only orders, but moods. On days when she felt uncertain about accepting the promotion, he served stronger tea without being asked. On evenings when she appeared exhausted, he offered a small bowl of soup, saying it had been made fresh that morning. Other customers seemed to experience similar attention. The young woman who sketched began painting more confidently over time. The middle-aged man reading paperbacks started bringing in manuscripts of his own writing. The elderly couple began staying longer, laughing more frequently. It was as though the cafe adjusted subtly to what each person needed most, not materially, but emotionally. One evening, as the sun set over the river in streaks of amber and gray, Lila stayed after closing. She had just learned that the promotion required relocation to another city. The decision weighed heavily on her. Mr. Rahman began wiping down tables slowly, sensing her hesitation to leave. She finally asked him how he seemed to know so much about everyone who walked through his door. He paused before answering, choosing his words carefully. He said that when people sit quietly long enough, they reveal more than they realize. Their posture, their silences, the way they hold a cup, these things speak. But there was something else in his tone, something unspoken. Lila pressed further, asking whether he had ever considered expanding the cafe into something larger. He smiled and said that some places exist precisely because they remain small. Over the following week, Lila began noticing subtle details that unsettled her and comforted her at the same time. The cafe's wall clock always showed the correct time, yet her phone sometimes lagged a few minutes behind while she was inside. Conversations felt deeper, more reflective, as if the noise of the outside world had been softened. One afternoon, she arrived earlier than usual and found the cafe already open, despite the sign stating a later start time. Mr. Rahman was arranging fresh flowers on each table. He looked up and told her she was on time. "For what?" she asked. "For remembering," he replied gently. That evening, Lila stayed until the cafe emptied. Mr. Rahman invited her to sit at the counter and poured 2 cups of tea. He explained that Morningtide had always been more than a cafe. It was a place where people paused long enough to reconnect with themselves. Over the years, countless individuals had faced turning points while seated at these tables. Some chose ambition, others simplicity. Some stayed in the city, others left. The cafe did not guide decisions, it reflected them. It allowed clarity to rise gently rather than forcing it. Lila listened carefully, feeling as though she had known this truth all along without articulating it. When she left that night, she walked along the river and considered the relocation offer again. The promotion promised financial growth and prestige, but it also required leaving behind the familiar rhythms she had begun to appreciate. Over the next few days, she observed her own reactions carefully. She noticed that thinking about the cafe brought calm rather than anxiety. Thinking about the promotion brought excitement, tinged with unease. She returned to Morningtide once more, intending to tell Mr. Rahman her decision. Before she spoke, Mr. Rahman placed a small envelope on the counter. Inside was a photograph taken years earlier. It showed the cafe filled with customers, and among them was a young version of Lila sitting at a corner table studying textbooks. She realized suddenly that she had indeed visited this place during university years ago, but had forgotten amid the rush of career ambitions. The realization did not frighten her, it grounded her. Morningtide had remembered her even when she had not remembered it. She understood then that certain spaces carry continuity in a way that busy lives often overlook. She told Mr. Rahman that she would decline the relocation. Instead, she would request a modified role that allowed balance and community engagement within her current city. Mr. Rahman nodded without surprise. He handed her a cup of tea and said that remembering is often more powerful than deciding. Months later, Lila walked into Morningtide with renewed energy. She had reshaped her career path, focusing on projects that supported local businesses rather than distant corporations. The cafe thrived quietly as always. The elderly couple still visited weekly. The aspiring writer had published his first short story. The young artist displayed her sketches along the walls with pride. Morningtide remained small, unchanged in structure, yet deeply changed in influence. One evening, as the sun set over the river in streaks of amber and gray, Lila prepared to leave. She noticed a small plaque newly placed near the door. It read simply, "Some places keep your memory safe until you return." She smiled softly, stepping out into the cool evening air by the river. The city lights shimmered on the water, and somewhere behind her, the cafe door closed gently. Morningtide continued standing on its quiet corner, not announcing its importance, not advertising its purpose. It simply remembered. And for those who entered at the right moment, remembering was exactly what they needed.